A ghost ship is frightening before anything supernatural happens. Because a ship is supposed to move, it is supposed to have a crew, passengers, lights, noise, direction. It is built around motion, footsteps in narrow halls, engines running, doors opening and closing. So when a ship is found abandoned, drifting, silent, and alone, something already feels wrong. Not because we know what happened, but because we know something must have happened. An empty house can feel abandoned. An empty hotel can feel forgotten. But an empty ship feels stranded between worlds, not fully part of the land, not fully lost to the sea, just waiting there in the dark, carrying rooms that should not still feel occupied. That is part of why Ghost Ship works. The Antonia Graza is not just a creepy location, it is a place that should feel dead, but does not feel finished. It should feel empty. Instead, it feels like something is still aboard. And from the moment the salvage crew finds it, the question is not just what happened here. The question is, why does this place still feel like it is waiting? Ghost Ship has one of those openings people remember, even if they forget the rest of the movie. It begins with elegance, music, dancing, a beautiful ship full of people who believe they are safe. That is what makes the scene so cruel. The opening does not begin with panic. It begins with comfort, celebration, warmth, life. And then, in one horrible moment, that life is cut apart. The scene is shocking, yes, but what makes it linger is not only the violence, it is the way the movie turns the ship itself into a witness. After that scene, the Antonia Graza is no longer just a vessel. It is marked. Every hallway, every ballroom, every empty room carries the weight of what happened there. The haunting does not feel like something that arrived afterward. It feels like something born from the damage. And that is an important difference. A haunted place can feel like something moved in after the tragedy. But Ghost Ship feels like the tragedy never fully left. The past is not hidden somewhere deep in the ship. It is in the walls, in the silence, in the way the movie lets beauty curdle into dread. The opening scene is not just a hook. It is a wound the rest of the movie keeps returning to. Some horror locations feel scary because something is inside them. A monster in the basement, a ghost in the hallway, a killer behind the door. But the Antonia Graza feels different. It feels scary because the place itself seems to remember. The ship is not just holding ghosts, it is holding atmosphere, violence, the last moments of people who never made it off. That is why the rooms feel preserved instead of abandoned. The ballroom does not feel empty in the simple sense. It feels like the music stopped, but the memory kept playing. The corridors do not feel like ordinary corridors. They feel like passages through something that has already happened and has not stopped happening. And that is the lingering dread of the movie. The ship is not just a setting where the story takes place. It feels like the story is trapped inside it. And when the salvage crew walks through those rooms, they are not just exploring a wreck. They are entering a memory that does not want to stay still. A place like that does not need to jump out at you. It can just sit there, dark, cold, full of evidence, letting you feel that something terrible happened before you fully understand what it was. And on the Antonia Graza, the past does not feel buried. It feels awake. The salvage crew does not board the ship because they are looking for ghosts. That is part of what makes the story work. They come because the ship looks like opportunity, a lost vessel, a possible fortune, a discovery that could change everything. To them, the Antonia Graza is not a nightmare yet. It is a job, and horror loves that kind of misunderstanding. Because sometimes danger does not arrive looking like danger. Sometimes it arrives looking like a reward. The crew sees value. They see something abandoned that might be claimed, a mystery they might be able to solve, profit from, or survive long enough to benefit from. But the movie keeps making that opportunity feel wrong. The ship is too quiet, too preserved, too full of absence. It feels less like they found it on their own and more like it let itself be found. That is an important shift because once discovery feels intentional, the whole mood changes. The characters may think they are moving forward by choice, but the audience starts to wonder if the path was already laid out for them. That is the trap inside Ghost Ship. Not the full answer. Not yet. Just the feeling. The feeling that the ship is not simply there to be salvaged. The feeling that something about it wants them aboard. At first, the Antonia Graza feels like something the crew is exploring. A room, a corridor, a mystery, a place where terrible things happened. But slowly, the movie changes that feeling. The ship stops feeling like a location and starts feeling like a force. It gives them pieces of the past. It shows them just enough to keep them curious, just enough to make leaving feel unfinished. And that is where Ghost Ship becomes more unsettling. The deeper the crew goes, the less the ship feels passive. The haunting does not feel like random noise. It starts to feel like pressure. A glimpse here, a presence there, a clue, a warning, a temptation. The ship gives just enough to keep them moving. And that raises the question, what makes a haunted place scarier? The ghost inside it, or the feeling that the place itself wants you there? Because once a place feels like it wants you, leaving becomes harder to imagine. Not because the doors are always locked, not because the sea is always raging, but because the story has already started closing around you. That is the horror of the Antonia Graza. It feels like the crew is walking through a memory, but slowly, that memory begins to feel like a mouth. And by the time they realize the ship may not be only revealing its past, they are already inside it. The ghosts in Ghost Ship are not just there to scare people. That would be simpler. They would be easier to understand if they were only angry spirits, shadows, or figures appearing in the dark. But the movie gives them something sadder. They feel trapped, held, unfinished. There is grief underneath the haunting. The dead do not feel like they have moved on, and they do not feel like they are simply choosing to stay. They feel caught in the place where the worst thing happened to them. And that makes the ship feel cruel in a deeper way, because it is not only a place where people died, it is a place where death did not release them. That is what makes haunted locations so powerful in horror. They take grief and make it physical. They turn memory into a room. They turn loss into a presence that can still be seen. On the Antonia Graza, the dead are not just reminders of the past. They are evidence that the past still has a hold. And when the living come aboard, they are not stepping into an empty ship. They are stepping into a place where the dead still seem to be waiting for something, or maybe trying to show something, or maybe warning them too late. That uncertainty is where the dread settles in, because the ghosts may be frightening, but they may not be the deepest danger aboard. As the movie goes on, the crew's movement through the ship starts to feel less like exploration. It begins to feel like being led, not openly, not in a way everyone understands at once, but slowly. The ship reveals pieces of itself. The past keeps resurfacing. The promise of gain keeps mixing with fear. And the crew keeps moving deeper into a place that already feels like it has taken too much and will keep taking more. That is one of the cruel things about this kind of horror. The characters are not always dragged screaming into the dark. Sometimes they walk there because they think there's still something to understand, something to gain, to fix, or to survive. And that is exactly how the ship keeps power over them. It gives them reasons to stay, even when everything about it says they should leave. The Antonia Graza is not frightening only because it is haunted. It is frightening because it creates momentum. Once the crew is aboard, the ship keeps pulling them forward, past room after room, past sign after sign, past the point where curiosity should have turned into escape. And that makes the haunting feel bigger than a collection of ghostly moments. It starts to feel designed, like the story is not simply remembering what happened, it is repeating the shape of it. By the end, Ghost Ship lets the pieces connect. The haunting, the violence, the crew's arrival, the feeling that they were being pulled through the ship instead of simply moving through it. None of it feels random anymore. And this is where I want to be careful, because Ghost Ship saves one of the most important answers for the end. The final turn changes how you understand the haunting, but it works better when the movie is allowed to reveal itself. So I will not take that discovery away here. If you have not seen the movie yet, that final turn is worth finding on your own. What matters for this discussion is the feeling the movie builds before the answer arrives. The sense that the ship has been doing more than sitting in the dark. the sense that the dead are not the only ones caught in its story, the sense that the living may have been brought aboard for a reason they do not understand yet. That is the deeper dread of ghost ship. Not just that something terrible happened, not just that the dead remain, but that the ship may still be a part of something unfinished, something that reaches forward, something that knows how to use memory, greed, fear, and curiosity to keep the living moving toward whatever awaits at the end. And once you feel that, the Antonia Graza becomes more than a haunted ship. It becomes a place with a direction, a place with a pull, a place where the past does not simply echo, it invites. That is why Ghost Ship stays interesting. Not because every piece of it is perfect, not because it is the deepest haunted location movie ever made, but because its central idea is strong. A place can remember, and in horror, memory is not always gentle. Sometimes a place remembers by preserving the wound. Sometimes it remembers by trapping the dead inside it. Sometimes it remembers by making the living feel like they have walked into something that began long before them. The Antonia Graza is frightening because it feels like all of those things at once. It is decayed and beautiful, empty and occupied, forgotten and waiting. It carries the souls of the dead, but it also feels like it is still pulling the living toward whatever waits at the end. That is a different kind of haunted house story. Only the house is floating in the dark, and the rooms are full of ocean silence, and the past has nowhere else to go. So it stays, it waits, it remembers. And maybe that is the scariest thing about a ghost ship. Not that it is lost, but that it knows exactly what it is carrying. So I'll leave you with this. What horror location made you feel like the place itself was dangerous? This is the Quiet Unease. Stay safe until we meet again.